you're going to save the world or whatever, like whatever you think matters. I had somebody explain to me the other day that her impact is she wants to have the best garden that has a huge impact on the community of like, they get to see it, get to be part of it, get to like, awesome. Well, then let's make sure your finances match that. That's the type of questions I'm trying to put together. Figure out what you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to be when you grow up, then make your finances fit.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bri and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast. Hey everyone, today we are doing a very special episode. This is the 100th episode of the Childfree Wealth Podcast, and today we're going to be talking with Dr. J all about his new book, The Childfree Guide to Life and Money, that is coming out the end of December. Dr. J, you want to start talking about a little bit more, just give a synopsis of what the book is about?
Sure. By the way, I still got to stop 100 episodes. Really, we've been doing this way too long. No, by the way, in case you're listening, and 100 episodes is a magic number in podcasts. It's essentially you exist and you're going to keep existing. I don't know. It's just a number of people use. But the book, I actually got a random Facebook message from somebody. And they're like, so I read your first book that supports your child-free wealth. And I'm from a publisher. Do you have a second book? And I'm like, of course. I've got 6 of them. What do you mean? And the publisher reached out. The editor from the publisher reached out and said, hey, what are you working on? I said, well, the first book was really stories about what it's like to be child-free. But it didn't go into well, how do you actually do financial planning? And how do you do life planning as a child-free person? And that's what I want to write about. And the surprising thing from the publisher standpoint was why aren't there other books about this? There's a financial planning book about everything. You pick a topic, there's a financial planning book on it. Why isn't there one about child-free people? And I'm like, I don't know, but let's fill that hole. And that's where it came from. The book itself has 3 sections. The first section is how do you plan your life? And I intentionally started with what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be when you grow up? Are we weird? What matters in life as the questions? Because I think if you don't figure that out, you could make up a financial plan that just gets to some goal you don't want. So life planning first, then the second goes into financial planning, and the third is kind of everything else. How does things change, your taxes, your marital status, things like that. And it was designed that way so that you can use it as kind of a DIY guide. You can journal your answers, work through it yourself, or you can work with a professional, either or. And actually, each chapter we've connected to a different course within our Childfree Academy, so you can have videos and all that fun stuff, so you can dig in as deep as you want. What I've heard from people that have gotten to read it so far, they've gotten good feedback. Well, Bri's actually read it. I'll come back to asking Bri what she thought, because we'll put her on a spot. But it took me a minute because I had to go through and look at it. And it's kind of like a choose your own adventure path of you get to choose, which chapters matter, which ones don't. It's not hey, it's going to be a fast read, because you get to the chapter all right, what do you want to do with your life? If you're doing it right, you're going to have to stop and figure out that answer before you move on to the next. Bri, what was your first read of it? I mean, we could do a book club meeting on this if we need to.
Yeah, I had to go back and kind of reskim it all yesterday because it's been a year since I've read it, I think. I read it in sections as you wrote it too. So my experience was much different than what listeners and what readers' experience will be, because I read it as parts that were in there and then got cut, or before things were added. So it was interesting though. And I came back, I had forgotten all about it, but the are we weird question being that very first chapter, and just asking that question, are we weird? And you kind of talk more about you and your wife and all of that in there, but then child-free people as a whole. And that is super interesting to me. Can you explain more of the are we weird question?
Yeah, and actually for everybody listening, if you pre-order the book, we'll give you the pitch later. We'll actually send you the first chapter if you ask nicely. We actually just got, the publisher said we can do that. Really, the entire child-free wealth, the system, the books, all started with this question of, are we weird? And just for context, we are recording this episode at the end of July. And right now, the childless cat lady memes are crazy, and people questioning what we're doing, and big talk. politically. But at the time, this was 3 years ago, I started looking at it and saying, okay, I'm studying to become a certified financial planner, and there's never once a mention of being child free. So my question was, like, are just my wife and I weird? And we're two PhDs. Like, literally, we went out to dinner this week and we were talking about a research study and designing one at dinner. We are weird, okay? Like literally, we were over here like designing a study to look at fertility rates and electronic medical records. It's not like as we're sitting around eating sushi. So we are weird there. But the question was, how weird are we for being child free and for the life we're living? And at the time, I did not know even the word child free existed. I did not know that the child free subreddit existed. That was one of my first exposures to the child free community. I will tell you that was not a great experience. If you haven't been on Reddit and looked at the child free subreddit, that's probably an okay thing never to look at. I mean, it's got its own interesting cesspool on Reddit, but how do people live a child free life? And are we weird? Now, from a research standpoint, weird has to do with the group you're getting sampled with it. So I'm getting kind of technical for a second, but like if we take child-free people in the entire population, we're about 25% of the US. I didn't know that at the time. So we're a pretty big group. If you compare child-free people to other child-free people, we're not that weird. Yeah, the fact that my wife and I embrace the garden and the rose, not that weird. That we love our dogs and our cats. I don't know if I love a cat every day, but that's a set. But like we love our pets. We're not that weird. You know, we are doing different things in our life. We're traveling, doing things. That's not weird. But within the general population, and I think that's one of those things to be aware of. You know, we work with child-free people every day now, and I'll talk to people. I'm like, I know your story. I've talked to people just like you. You're very normal for the people we serve, but we're weird in the general population. And I started off kind of mentioning this political thing, and I don't want to get too far into politics, but this judgment around childless folks and the childless cat ladies, all that, like, that's because people don't understand us. And they may see us as weird, but within our population, we're not. It's this balancing act of like being okay with who you are and okay with the group you're in and understanding it's different than the norm, and that's okay. Standard life script is the one that says you go to school, you get married, you have kids, all that. Cool. We've picked a different path. That doesn't mean we're weird or bad for picking that path, or for those that didn't choose, you know, just being kind of thrown onto you. I think when people read that Are You Weird chapter, there's a lot of folks like, that was like their big takeaway from the book is like, no, I'm not that weird in the subset of child-free folks, but still there are days I feel weird. You know, right now, day to day, there are some days where I'm like, we just don't fit the state we're living in or the community we're living in. But then I'll talk to child-free people like, no, but we fit. And how do you find those people and find that community? Bri, are you weird?
I am very weird. Yeah, I don't think that weird is a bad thing, though, or even what would life be if everybody wasn't a little bit weird? Pretty boring, probably.
Well, I don't know, though. There's such a pressure from society to conform to the norms. You know, that we all have to follow the same path. Look, you know, the political environment has made this even worse. I mean, social media, politics, all this, like this echo chambers, you've got to do the same thing everybody else is doing. You know, why can't you just be happy with your life and happy with your choices and live your life? And why can't we all just live our own lives and not worry about everybody else? Like, you know, as long as they're not bothering me, go live whatever you want to do. Like, maybe it's just, there's actually some science around herd mentality. And if you stick out from the herd, you're the first to get cut out. And that actually is like true in the animal world. I think we've kind of evolved away from that. Like we're a little bit better than just basic animal instincts, but some days it feels weird. I was telling Bri this, and I might have told on the podcast, and that's okay if I have. I had bought a shirt. It was actually a child-free shirt, and I was at my marina for my boat, and I run out of clothes because I had made a mess. Let's just say I made a mess on the boat. I'd run out of clothes, and I'm like, you know, this marina is very political, let's call it that, very right-leaning. If I wear this child-free shirt, I'm probably going to get some people judging me on the way by, and to the point where they may even call it out and comment and other things. And I'm like, am I brave enough just to even wear a shirt that says I'm child-free? And it's interesting that you have to pause and think that way. Now, mind you, this is in the Deep South in Mississippi. I mean, political, religious things, but it's okay to be a little different. It's okay to be a lot different as long as you're happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a key thing is as long as you're happy with it, it's okay to be whoever you are. And the polarization that you talked about doesn't make it always feel like that's okay. In this book, did you intend to write it from a place of making people feel at peace with that difference? Or what was the thought behind that?
I don't know that I have the skills to make people at peace with their life. Like that takes a lot of work. It's kind of like, I can give you some hints, so when I did the first book, the portraits book, I gave people examples of lives, and it was really to say, like, there are other people like you, because a lot of people are like, well, what does it look like to be 50 or 60 and child free? What is it, why do people choose that? So that's kind of where I was going with the first book. This book is more like, okay, you've made the choice, or the choice is made for you. How do you live a life that is authentically yours and that you're happy with? Now, whether that puts you at peace or not, well, I don't know. There's some people that are unhappy even when they're happy, but how do you figure out what matters to you and then make your life and finances around that? And it's kind of like a giant question. It's the Maslow's self-actualization, like, what's the point of life and why am I doing this? And it's like those hard questions are the ones we get to face a whole lot earlier as child-free folks. And there's no answer out there. And by the way, I don't give you the answer either. I'm just being transparent. I give you questions to ask yourself to think it through, because I don't think there is just one answer. We've been lucky to help hundreds of child-free folks through their life and financial plan. And no two people look exactly the same. What makes them happy, what matters, works it through. And I'm actually working on another book now because, of course, I'm addicted to writing books now. But the question I'm asking there is, what do you want the second line of your obituary to say? So the first line would normally say, hey, Jay died at age whatever in this location. And then the second line would say, father of 3 leaves behind, whatever. Well, that's not going to be us. What do you want that to be for you? What do you want your impact to be? What do you want your life to look like when you sum it all up? What's on your tombstone? And if you can figure out that answer, then figure out your life plan, your finances are pretty easy. If you don't know what you want in the end, then it's hard. And I don't think any answer you have is going to be the same forever, but at least where do you want to aim for and what matters? And that's what I'm trying to get people to do, is kind of do that self-reflection on what matters. I mean, Bri, have you figured out kind of what your point in life is? What's your second line of your tombstone say?
I've thought about this for many years, and it's continually been a constant, but I just want to help people. And how I help people varies from time to time. But if I died tomorrow, I would hope people say that I can made a difference in the world by helping others.
Awesome. So if that's your purpose, then we got to make sure your life and finances aim that direction. Mm-hmm. People go, well, but that doesn't make sense. How does that relate to my job? Well, does your job help people? Or do you use the money from your job to help people? Whatever that is, we have to figure that out. And what happens is most people get kind of halfway through their life and they're just been going through the motions. And they're like, really? Is this what I'm going to do for the next 40 years of my life, is just clock in, clock out, do my job and not really make an impact? And by the way, impact doesn't have to be you're going to save the world or whatever. Whatever you think matters. Somebody explained to me the other day that her impact is she wants to have the best garden that has a huge impact on the community of they get to see it, get to be part of it, get to awesome. Well, then let's make sure your finances match that. That's the type of questions I'm trying to put together. Figure out what you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to be when you grow up, then make your finances fit it.
Absolutely. And with that, obviously you've done this and you've met with multiple clients, and so you kind of had that knowledge. How did you come up with the framework of that? Is it just through that experience? Is it thinking through these things beforehand in your own life? What'd that look like?
So yeah, there's definitely part of me in there. Let's be real on that. I mean, anyone that writes a book and says it's not about them, they're not being honest. There's stuff in there by the Garden of the Rose that really does come out of the way my wife and I live our life. But it's also something that is reflected in the clients we serve and the people we talk to. So I started off, I actually did a survey of child-free folks, got about 300 people respond to that, did interviews, been working with clients. The fortunate thing is I get to look into people's lives and see what it's really like. If you help a couple hundred child-free folks look at their life and finances, you start seeing common themes. Like, for example, most child-free folks don't want to pass on money to the next generation. It's not their priority. They either want to wind down their wealth, die with zero, whatever you want to call it. That's a trend. Well, then how do we make a life and financial plan that fits that? Things like retirement. Retirement's not a goal, more of a kind of kick back, dial back work, and what we call FILE. Financial independence, live early. That's a trend. That comes out of seeing a whole lot of people talk about this. A lot of child-free folks want to start their own small business. I don't know why. They just do. Cool. That's a trend. And you start seeing that. And my PhD, my work's mostly in qualitative research. You start asking why. That's the whole point. You ask questions, why? And if you've ever met with me, you'll realize I ask a lot of questions, and Bri loses her mind on these some days. I'm like, really? Just give me the answer. No, I'm just going to keep asking why. And once you figure out how people think, you start seeing these patterns. And for example, one of the big patterns I found is this standard life script that says you got to go to school, get married, all that, keeps popping up throughout your life. And things like buying a house are part of the standard life script that people don't realize they're going back to the standard script, even though they're living a different life. We actually have a chapter in the book that debates renting versus owning. By the way, spoiler alert, it says rent. But the truth is, people say, well, I have to buy a house. Why? Well, because that's the only way to get ahead. Why? And eventually I asked them, whose voice in your head saying you got to do this? And they'll say, well, my dad always told me you have to own real estate. Cool. Your dad's not living your life. How about you live your life? If you're going to move every 2 years, it makes no sense to buy a house. So you start finding this, and you start seeing these trends. And the other thing that happens is you start seeing what doesn't fit. So Bri and I did a series of episodes about what does a CFP learn? And I kept asking Bri, hey, what in there does it say about child-free? It doesn't. Well, how does that change for child-free people? And you can start listing all of these things. Things like life insurance, not a big deal for child-free folks, but CFP says you have to have it. You start figuring that out, and it's somewhat easier to find the things that don't fit and then write about those. I probably would have not had much success if I started writing the book well, here's what you could do to follow the standard plan. No, it's more kind of these are the things that are quote unquote weird that stick out. And what you're really seeing in the book is you're seeing hundreds of child-free folks, their lives reflected in there. You will see some of your life reflected in there too. It's just because there are other people like you that are part of that same subset. You're also going to find points that don't fit you. That's cool too. It's not all going to fit you. That's part of the point. But I'm trying to talk about this and say, all right, if you're going to live a different life, you're going to have an alternative family structure. How does that impact your life finances? And then what can we learn from each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And in there too, you introduce all the different things. And one of them, though, we've talked about before is the 8-0 baby steps. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for those who have followed Dave Ramsey, he's got the baby steps. We decided to go the other way, the 8-0 baby steps. And we started looking at it. And I'm going to pick on Dave Ramsey for a minute because why not? I actually was trained as a Ramsey preferred coach, and I used to teach that method. And the first 3 steps between Dave Ramsey and what we're talking about, very similar. Get out of debt, get on a budget, have an emergency fund. We can all have small nuances there. But then it changes. So if you look at the Ramsey program, it's interesting. They actually have a plan for everything except having kids. Kids come whenever they want in the Dave Ramsey plan. It doesn't have a financial plan. That seems a little weird with me. So we decided, all right, let's look at our own way of looking at this. We said, all right, no baby step 4, save and invest towards your goals. So for example, if retirement's not a goal, maybe we don't save for retirement. Now I know that sounds really weird, but there are different ways you can invest your money based on your goals. Buying a house, may not be a priority, so we don't save and invest for that. Travel might be, so we save and invest towards that. You can shift the way you save and invest to match your goals. Number 5 in the no baby steps is get your insurance right. I already talked about things like long-term, I already talked about life insurance, not a big deal. Disability insurance, big deal. Long-term care insurance, big deal. We need to make sure we have the right insurance. We don't have too much or too little. Number 6 is estate planning. So even if you're in your early 20s, you still need to have a will, a power of attorney, executor. You need to do that. And actually, in the book, we talk about we're hoping to have a solution to the end of the year, so we'll actually be able to be people's power of attorney executor as Childfree Wealth, because it's a big issue of who you trust to do that. Number 7 in the no baby steps is planning for parents. This is that question about who's expecting you to take care of them? Elderly family members, others. Because what we found is if you don't have a plan for your parents and they have not planned well for their finances, it can have a pretty negative impact on you. And the 8th no baby step is die with zero. And how do you actually do that? How do you wind down your wealth? And how do you give it, live it, and enjoy it? And what happens is the first 3 steps, getting out of debt, good for everybody. The others are specifically to the child-free life. And they're not necessarily 100% linear, but these are the things you need to check off to make sure you have a good, sound financial foundation as a child-free person.
Yeah. And we've talked about them, in the past before, but this is really where they came about and came to be. And so thank you for kind of talking more about that, because while we've talked about them, we never shared that it was for this book. And it was fun to kind of go through those last year.
So, okay, little behind the scenes on this. The podcast overall, somebody said they read the book and it was like they had my voice in their head. And I'm like, that's a scary thing on its own. But they're like, I've heard you talk about some of this before. And you're right. If you've listened to all our podcast episodes, it's not going to be earth shattering, different stuff, because what we've done over the past 100 episodes is tried this stuff out. Bri and I are over here talking about I'd be writing something up and I'm like, hey, Bri, I want to talk about X. And she's like, well, where'd that come from? Well, that's this chapter I'm working on for this. And it's something we're trying out. And Bri's also being behind the scenes, client meeting. I'll say, hey, this is where this fits. We've been building this as we go along. The book just puts it all into a nice process so you can read, you can work through. There also will be an audiobook. So if you want to listen to it, you can do that too. It's kind of the podcast, you're kind of watching the sausage get made, which might be a little bouncing all over the place. So we did a whole series on investing. Well, the investing strategy that's there in the podcast is the same that's in the book. 3 fun portfolios, set it, forget it, simple. And one of the things we're talking about in the book is we're trying to talk about how we simplify your finances so your life can be amazing. Well, we've been kind of dancing around that concept in the podcast as we've been working through this concept of financial planning for child-free folks, because there is no book on this. We're writing it as it goes along. I signed the contract just about a year ago now. I did the entire book done by August of last year, written, done, to the publisher by the end of August. It comes out in December of this year. It's about an 18-month process that it takes to publish a book. I would love it to be faster, but it is what it is. But you're seeing some of it in the podcast. We're trying things out, working through it. If you like the podcast, you'll love the book. If you haven't, the people that are reading the book are going to go, oh, hey, by the way, I'd like to hear more. Go to the podcast. They're connected because we're trying to figure out what does that language sound like for child-free folks and around their life financial planning. And you're right, Bri. You've gotten to see the inside of it and known the inside scoop. So I appreciate you at least keeping it under your lid a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of fun to know secrets sometimes,
Okay, so I'll give people a little of the other secret. So the next book I'm working on, I just sent it to agents this morning, is really around that child-free midlife crisis. What do you do after you hit your personal, professional, financial goals? And I started working on that, and I had kind of a brainstorm. And I sent Bri, I'm like, okay, here's the chapter summaries I'm working on. She's like, well, can I share that with, my wife? I'm like, yes, we can't share it beyond that, but we're working on this stuff. And it's really interesting. This is the stuff that I really get excited about, is creating content that doesn't exist, creating processes that don't exist. And I had somebody the other day go, we're doing a lot of interviews. We're hiring staff, and they said, is it really that much different for child-free folks? And I'm like, yeah. Like, literally, this is what I spent all my time working on. And they're like, well, I mean, doesn't it just mean you take kids out of the plan? And I'm like, okay, first of all, you're not a great candidate for us to hire. But like, people just don't get it. They don't see it. We at Childfree Wealth and in the podcast and the book, we live in it and we see it. Okay. So all this stuff with the childless cat lady and all that, like, I've seen this stuff over and over. I knew it was coming. It's just a matter of which politician decides to get fired up about it this week. We actually had to put part of the plan for the book. What happens if the book gets banned? Which may sound crazy, but not really in this political world. You know, somebody might say, well, I don't want to be talking about this child-free stuff. I mean, it is a big deal, but this is what we're building behind the scenes. And it is the stuff that gets me excited. You know, the day-to-day, hey, you know, running the business, paying the bills. Yeah, that's not the stuff that gets me excited. It's like, okay, cool. What's the answer for the child-free midlife crisis? And by the way, I don't have that answer right now. That's why I'm writing the book, to try to figure it out. You know, like this book was looking on the life and financial plan. Awesome. We've got ideas there. What's the next step? Now we're going to start talking about estate planning and other things. So Bri keeps getting these little tastes. But what the other thing, and Bri, I want you to weigh in on this. How much has it changed over the past, a year and a half you've worked with me? I mean, you've seen like versions 1 through whatever, 32 or whatever version number this is. What's that look like?
It's really hard to remember all of it just because it was you'd send things and you're like, hey, read this. And I'd read it and I'd make comments and be like, this part, I don't know about this, but this part I really like. And so you tweak it all along the way. It is fun to go through that process and see that, like, now seeing it be an actual book, the one sitting on the desk behind you. And you had that when you were down there about a month ago. And it's like, wow, all of these Word documents are now a physical book. So it's really, really fun to go through that. But I have the last 2 questions for you. What is the easiest part of writing this book? And what is the hardest part? Because I think I have thoughts based off of seeing this whole process and seeing all the tweaks, but I want to hear from you.
The easiest process is, most of this is stuff that I'm talking to clients about on a day-to-day basis, so it's not new. What you're seeing, like, you'll see the chapter on estate planning, for example. The questions are there, the same ones I ask the clients. It's kind of there's a certain set that I go through. It's just putting that there. I think the hardest part of this, I had a freak out moment, and Bri got to help me through this one. The editor, when you work with an editor with a book, they always give you feedback. Good, bad, and ugly. Love my editor. She's awesome. I actually give her and her dog, Erin's my editor, and Cheddar, her dog, a shout out in the book. Awesome to work with. But then she put a comment in there about check your privilege. And I'm like, whoa, what do you mean? Now, mind you, I grew up with not a lot of money. Yes, I understand I'm a white male. I understand that has impact on privilege. But I have not grown up with a whole bunch of money. I've worked hard for it, and it sent me into a spin out for about a month. It might have been a little longer than that, but at least a month of like, how do you write a book about getting ahead on money in life and still understand and appreciate privilege? And it still, by the way, is one of those topics. It bothers me every once in a while because I'm like, all right, how do we be forward looking and understand that there are still people that are suffering, still people that are having a challenge, but also serve people and help them get ahead with their finances and help them enjoy it, and the money guilt and all that. And Bri and I had quite a few conversations about this. And the end was like, acknowledge your privilege, acknowledge what's in there, and say, here's an opportunity to learn. But I still some days go, did I address that appropriately? Was it, handled well? I mean, because you can see the struggle people are having. Like, being child-free does not automatically make you rich. There are people barely making ends meet. But how do you write a financial book that talks about how do you get out of that without acknowledging some of the systemic problems and the other things around income inequality? And I don't know, Bri, you and I probably talked about that privilege issue for 100 hours. I mean, it's a big deal. I don't think there's an answer to it. I mean, do you?
I don't think so. There's no There's no good answer when there are so many systemic issues, but we did have lots of conversations about it. And as much as we want to change the entire system, we can't change the entire system. And so it's learning to play within the system and how can you move forward with that.
Yeah, and when you're writing a book, so I wrote a book that was written last year at least, but I started before then. You're really taking a snapshot in time. And actually, there's some chapters I had to do a final read through just before I went printing, like looking for small errors. I'm like, I want to change this now. I want to change, like, things have changed in even a year. And how do you write things that are appropriate to the time and understand where people are at and talk about finance? There's no right way to do that. And it's probably the hardest part of this is you're trying to say, okay, I want to help you with your life and finances. We wrote the book and our services are expensive. We charge $10,000 a year. Not everybody can afford that. I acknowledge that. So we wrote the book and saying, okay, here's a way you can do it yourself. The book, I don't know, it's less than $20. I don't know the exact price off the top of my head. And that's affordable to most. So how do we make sure we serve those folks? And then also have enough content in there for people that are doing well and do a balancing between them. You read it. You tell me if I got it close. I don't think I got it right, but did I get close?
Yeah. One last thing before we go here then is, can you tell people about your goal with this book too?
I swear that the book and the academy are there for my soul, to help people to really give back. And that's my big one. I want to help people, but that's not measurable. That's just kind of like you, Bri, of I want to help people. Well, okay, cool. Well, the other goal, and this is, I don't know if it's just an ego goal or just to make a mark or whatever it is. We want to work to try to figure out how to get this book on a bestseller list. And I don't mean an Amazon bestseller list. By the way, you can get on an Amazon bestseller list by picking a category that nobody else is in and just selling the 3 books. There's actually somebody that got on an Amazon bestseller list for a book with a picture of his foot. That was the entire book. Okay. Amazon bestseller list, not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a USA Today or New York Times other bestseller list, because child-free books being on bestseller lists is kind of like a stake in the sand or in the ground saying, we're here. Now, to do that, to hit the New York Times bestseller list, you'd need to sell about 7,500 copies in the first week, which may sound crazy. But when you think about 25% of the U.S. is child-free, it's not that crazy. What it does take, though, is a whole lot of people buying the book actually under pre-sale. So this is me making my shameless pitch. Go buy the book, okay? Put $20 in there. It's not going to hurt you. Go to your favorite library, ask them to stock it. Go to your favorite indie bookstore, ask them to stock it. I prefer, if you're going to buy the book, buy it from your small local bookstore. But buy it under pre-sale. That's the best thing you can do for an author, because the more it sells pre-sale, then it helps the marketing and all the other fun stuff. What we're also doing is we're doing a giveaway. So we'll include it in the show notes. If you buy it on pre-sale, send us something that says you bought on pre-sale, a copy of the invoice or the receipt or whatever, and we will enter you in a giveaway. Each month between now and the end of the year, we're giving away a free checkup. So we charge $500 for this. I'm going to be doing the checkup with you. I will be your Childfree Wealth specialist for that. You'll send us all your information. We'll spend an hour working together on what's working, what's not in your financial plan. We're going to do a drawing of that every month in between now and the end of the year. And if you buy your pre-sale now, you actually get a drawing every month until the end of the year, so you get more chances. And we're trying to do a whole bunch of things. We're doing a whole bunch of press. We're doing speaking opportunities. If you work at a company, you want me to come and speak, awesome. We're going to do a whole lot of work to try to work on the bestseller list. Now, I know in my heart, we may not get there. That's okay. I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. But also, it would be a big deal for the community to have a New York Times bestseller that says The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money. It's these type of things that work there. It's a call to action. Get your friends to order, you to order. Yeah, the book doesn't come out to the end of the year, but the more people that order, the more it goes up the scale, because what happens is anyone that orders between now and December 31st when the book comes out gets counted as if the first week. And it's only the first week sales that matter. Like, people don't realize, like, there's so much like weird stuff behind marketing books and all that, and the systems and the way it works. And there's some politics in it. Like, you could even hit 7,500 sales and still not make the list because it's an editorial decision. But trying to get you all to activate and go out there. If you can help, awesome. If you happen to run a book club or something, you want to do a book club, awesome. You want me to come say hi to the book club, I'm happy to do that and talk about it. Tell us how we can be involved. We want to reach out. We want to try to make this a bestseller. Bri, is that a crazy goal or what?
A little bit, but I don't think you've ever shied away from crazy.
Weird, okay? We used the word weird, not crazy.
Hey, I was just using the same terminology you just used.
Okay, literally we do have in our executive team, how crazy are Jay's ideas? That is part of our scoring. But I think if we as a community are going to grow and be accepted, we need some kind of off the wall ideas.
Absolutely. And we'll include all that information in order to pre-order the book in the show notes, as well as information for the giveaway. Otherwise, it's been a fun 100 episodes. And we will see you in the next one.
Bri, what are we going to do the next 100? I mean, do we have a plan for that one?
If I have a plan for tomorrow, it's a good day, Jay. I can't plan for the next 100 yet.
All right.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.